Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. The onside kick is an incredibly high-risk, high-reward play. The reward of kicking it short is obvious. If you recover it, you gain another possession. The opposing defense, which just presumably allowed a scoring drive, has to go back out on the field without a moment to breathe. In the average football game, both teams get the same number of possessions. So if you successfully execute the onside kick, you just stole a possession, which can be absolutely critical. The danger of the onside kick, however, is also obvious. If you fail at converting, you're giving the ball to the opposition with incredible field position. Instead of the other team starting somewhere around the 20-yard line or the 30-yard line, they're starting past midfield, and might even be in a good enough position where even if your defense can prevent them from getting a first down, they still might score because they're already in field goal range with how strong and how accurate kickers are today. And all the momentum you had from that last scoring drive is now gone because of the great field position you gave up in the process. The onside kick only works somewhere around 20% of the time, and it usually is a desperation play in the fourth quarter when a team needs to steal possession and keep control of the football. However, that's not to say that the onside kick is only tried in the fourth quarter of a game. Teams can use the onside kick whenever they want. Heck, the most famous onside kick in the history of the NFL, without a doubt, came in the third quarter of Super Bowl 44. So you will see teams on occasion try this high-risk, high-reward play in the first, second, and the third quarter of the game. But I guarantee you that you've never seen anything like this before. Because I want you to imagine a team attempting not one, not two, but three onside kicks in not just the same game, but in the first quarter. That's right. In a 2004 game against the Indianapolis Colts, Jeff Fisher and the Tennessee Titans called three onside kicks in the opening quarter of the game, in an incredibly bold strategy that had somewhat surprising results. And this is the story behind the craziest game plan in the history of the Tennessee Titans franchise. Before I talk about the actual game plan in question, we need some context to understand the two teams playing, as well as the clear mismatch and problem that existed between the two sides. It's December 5th, 2004, making it Week 13 of the NFL season, and we have an AFC South matchup on our hands at the RCA Dome between the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. We'll talk about the Colts in a bit, but it's safe to say that for the Titans, their season was an absolute train wreck, and since moving to Tennessee in 1997, it was easily on pace to be their worst year in franchise history, as well as the worst full season where Jeff Fisher was in charge. After making the playoffs in 4 of the previous 5 seasons, winning 70% of their games since becoming the Titans in 1999, the Titans were just 4-7 entering this game against the Colts, and were well out of the playoff picture, sitting 3 games back at the final spot with 5 to play. For all intents and purposes, their season was over. They would need to run the table, and then hope for a miracle to have any shot at salvaging their season. Not saying it couldn't be done. Heck, the 1996 Jaguars went from 4-7 to the AFC Championship, but it was looking almost impossible, especially after an injury to Steve McNair left him sidelined, forcing the Titans to play Billy Volek under center. And even the Titans seemingly admitted that their season was done, with McNair saying that at this point, the Titans just had to play spoiler. So who was the next challenge for the Titans against if they wanted to have any hopes of keeping their season alive? Well, it was against the Indianapolis Colts, otherwise known as the 8-3 Indianapolis Colts, who had command on the AFC South and who were looking like one of the hottest teams in football, having won 4 straight games and having scored 41 points or more in each of their last 3 games. The Colts had an absolutely dominant offense, as by this point in the season, through 11 games, they had scored 380 points, averaging an insanely high 34.5 points per game, which was the top total in the league and one of the top totals in NFL history. For some perspective, the Titans had only hit 34 points in 1 game so far this season, when they had 48 in a Monday Night Football victory on the road at Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers. And the Colts were averaging that amount. Entering December, the gap between them and the second highest scoring offense in football was an insane 61 points, meaning that the Colts had an offense that was over 19% better than second place. They had scored at least 24 points in every single game, and had what was easily the best point differential in the league at plus 141. Indianapolis was peaking, and was on cruise control, especially after a dominant Thanksgiving performance the week before against the Detroit Lions, where they won 41-9, and it easily could have been more, as the Colts scored all 41 points in the first 43 minutes of the game before letting their foot off the gas. And the man in charge of this offense at the quarterback position? You might have heard of him before. Peyton Manning was on a record-breaking pace in 2004. And at the time, outside of Dan Marino's 1984 season, where he obliterated every single record in the book, you could make the argument that what Manning did in 2004 was the greatest season by any signal caller in NFL history. He was coming off of that Detroit game on Thanksgiving where he threw 6 touchdowns and no interceptions, posting a passer rating of 141.4. And the scary part, despite throwing 6 touchdowns and no picks, that wasn't even his highest passer rating in a game that season. He was that good. Through the first 11 games, Manning had completed over 67% of his passes while throwing for 3,196 yards and 41 touchdowns, and while posting a passer rating of 126.6. If that pace held, then he would have thrown for 4,648 yards, which would have ranked 9th in NFL history at the time, and would have thrown for 59 touchdowns, which would have smashed the all-time record held by Dan Marino when he threw for 48 in 1984. Only 3 times in NFL history had a quarterback thrown for 40 or more touchdowns in a season, and here was Peyton Manning, entering December and on pace to throw for close to 60. And to add on to that, the 126.6 passer rating would not only have been the all-time record, but would have destroyed the previous record held by Steve Young in 1994, when he had a rating of 112.8. Manning's rating entering December was nearly 15 points higher than the record at the time. All of this is to say that Peyton Manning was really, really good. And this posed a problem for the Titans, because the Titans were not very good, especially when it came to their pass defense. When you're 4-7, there's many reasons why you're bad, and the Titans' pass defense definitely wasn't helping their issue. The previous week against the Houston Texans, they allowed David Carr of all people to complete 70% of his passes in a winning effort. In one game earlier in the season against the San Diego Chargers, in a game where they got fetty-whopped and lost 17-38, they allowed Drew Brees to complete 80% of his passes and throw 3 touchdowns and no interceptions while posting a passer rating of 149.2, only a few points shy of the coveted perfect passer rating number. And perhaps most importantly for the purposes of our story, the last time they played the Colts earlier in the season in Nashville, not only did the Titans lose 31-17, but Peyton Manning went 24 for 33 with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. He had his way with the defense, especially in the second half, where excluding the final drive of the game since it was a kneel down to win it, the Colts scored a touchdown on their final 3 drives. It's easier said than done, but for the Titans entering this game, the question was simple. How the heck do we stop Peyton Manning? The Colts offense seems unstoppable. The Titans are not a very good team, especially since they were dealing with injuries on both sides of the ball. And without stopping Manning, this team had no chance of winning. Outside of placing a bounty on Manning Greg Williams style, back in 2004, you just weren't going to stop Manning from doing his thing. It was impossible. Manning was having one of the greatest seasons by any player in the over 80-year history of the league, and I do not say that lightly. You couldn't stop Manning when he was on the field. But what if you could stop him by keeping him off the field? That's when Jeff Fisher and the coaching staff hatched up a crazy, bold, and somewhat genius idea. If we were going to beat the Colts, we were going to steal possessions and go with the onside kick to try and keep them off the field. And with that, the wheels went spinning for one of the craziest game plans in NFL history. Fisher knew that his team was undermatched and entered this game as the heavy underdogs. Indianapolis entered this game as 12-point favorites, so nobody was giving the Titans much of a chance, if any at all, to win this one. So Fisher decided that his strategy was going to be that of a team that had absolutely nothing to lose. As Fisher said, the Titans would have to do some things out of the ordinary to have a chance to win. He then added, "We told our guys, so what if they get it on the 40-yard line? They're 3 plays away from being on the 40-yard line anyway." Translation, we're not stopping Peyton Manning. No matter how hard we try, we're not stopping Manning. So if we give the ball to the Colts, they're just going to march down the field anyways, much like they've done all season, and much like they did in the second half in the first meeting. Might as well try and steal a possession if the negative outcome is going to be exactly the same. Now, it's time to see this game plan in action. After the Titans get the ball and punt it away, the Colts drive down the field thanks to a 37-yard completion from Manning to Brandon Stokely. Any hopes that Manning would have an off day or forget how to throw a football were washed away on that first play, because in the span of literally one play, the Colts were already past the 40-yard line of Tennessee. Turns out, Jeff Fisher was wrong in his analysis. The Colts weren't 3 plays away from being on the 40, they were 1 play away. Mike Vanderjagt hit a 47-yard field goal to make it 3-0, but 2 plays later, Billy Volek hit Drew Bennett for a 48-yard touchdown to make it 7-3 in favor of the Titans. We're not even 5 minutes into the game, and this game's already got fireworks. And it's about to have even more fireworks because the Titans are about to try their bold strategy. Craig Hentrich executes a perfect onside kick that the Colts never see coming in a million years. In fact, considering how many blockers the Titans had in front and how much breathing room Scott McGarrahan has to field the kick, this might be the easiest onside kick recovery you're going to see in your life. Just like that, the Titans had successfully executed the surprise onside kick, and they were able to get points out of that possession when Gary Anderson eventually hit a 45-yard field goal to make it a 10-3 game. Surely they're not going to do it again, right? Well, yes and no. On the second kickoff, Hentrich did it again. He went short. However, the kick went out of bounds. Now back in 2004, there was a rule that for a short free kick like this one, you got to redo it. So the Titans kicked it off deep on the play immediately afterwards, as this one somewhat failed. But by this point, the Colts knew exactly what was happening. One onside kick early on? Alright, they're going into the trick playbook and trying to play that spoiler role. Two onside kicks early on? They don't think they can stop us. Sure enough, the Colts score a touchdown on their ensuing possession, with Peyton Manning hitting Marvin Harrison for a 24-yard touchdown to make it a 10-10 game. Tennessee was not going to stop Indianapolis on this day. The message was clear after allowing two easy scores and after allowing Manning to carve up the defense. If the Titans got a chance to kick off again, they had to go with an onside kick. It was their only chance. And after Billy Volek hit Drew Bennett for a 28-yard touchdown to make it 17-10 Titans, Hentrich lined up for the kickoff. What followed was the third onside kick of the first quarter. And amazingly enough, the Titans recovered this one too. Troy Fleming pounced on it. And for the second time in the first 13 minutes of the game, the Titans had stolen a possession away from the Colts. Prior to this game, there was just one successful first quarter onside kick in 2004, which was done by the Falcons in Week 2. The Titans had two of them in this game. And after the game, all the talk was about just how bold and how gutsy this game plan was, with praise coming from both sides. As Fisher said, "I think you could see by our aggressive approach with the things we try to do on special teams. As a group this week, we felt that would give us our best chance to stay in the ballgame." Hentrich, the man who executed more onside kicks in the first quarter than most kickers execute over the course of an entire season, said on the strategy, "If we get 2 or 3 extra possessions, you never know what can happen." And the Colts were in awe of this strategy by the Titans, with wide receiver Brandon Stokely saying, "It seemed like every time they scored, they tried an onside kick. You knew they were going to try some stuff, but 3 onside kicks in a row?" Defensive back Nick Harper echoed those thoughts, saying, "We knew they were going to do it. We just didn't know how many times they were going to do it." And Peyton Manning, who was the reason why the Titans were trying this strategy in the first place, said that he loves using this strategy when playing Madden, saying that during video games, "I onside kick because I don't feel like playing defense. You just go ahead and get it back." Maybe that is what we are going to see more of late in the year. Just more aggressive things trying to keep our offense off the field. The strategy was brilliant. It worked exactly as intended, as the Titans stole 2 possessions from the Colts and forced the Colts to use their hands team the rest of the way instead of their normal kickoff coverage team, which impacted their starting field position. And the crazy part? The Titans still got absolutely blown out. As exciting as the first quarter was, and as great as Fisher's game plan was, and as great as the execution of said game plan was, this one wasn't close, as the Colts won 51-24. Manning threw for 425 yards and 3 touchdowns, continuing his insane season. Edgerrin James added fuel to the fire by running for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Colts, despite losing 2 possessions off of the 2 successful onside kicks, had 567 yards of total offense compared to just 340 for the Titans. And after the Titans led it 24-17 after the first quarter, thanks to 3 touchdown passes by Billy Volek to Drew Bennett, the Colts dominated the rest of the way, scoring the final 34 points and allowing the Titans to pick up just 83 yards on their final 9 drives of the game, 39 of which came on the last drive in complete garbage time. It just showed how great the Colts were. Even with this game plan working perfectly, the Titans still lost by 27 points and got blown out. Still, roughly 20 years later, this insane game plan is still remembered today for how bold and how crazy it was. Whether we will ever see a coach fully commit to this strategy over the course of an entire game, instead of the first quarter, remains to be seen. But there was something to this idea of a team knowing that they physically cannot stop an offense from scoring, so they just try and steal possessions and hoped to keep pace by keeping the opposition's offense off the field as long as possible. It didn't result in a win at the end of the day, because the Colts were that good and the Titans were that bad. But it deserves recognition for how exciting and how insane it was, even if it showed that at the end of the day, the best laid plans of mice and men go awry. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.